Hi, I'm Hannah, and this is Lev and Nigel and Evangelos. We are here we've been working on Air Public, and in collaboration with Buggy Air and the Internet of Things Academy. Buggy Air kindly lent us their prototype this weekend to gather air quality data. We're interested in using mobile air quality sensors to create real-time, accurate, high spatial density air quality data, which we want to publish as open data so that the public and policymakers can make smarter decisions. Air quality monitoring at the moment is patchy at best. It's done with static monitoring stations that are quite far apart. In between the data is modelled, and it doesn't actually capture the localised pollution hotspots. So it's not quite good enough. So we want to create moving data points within the model, a lot of them, to create data that's actually relevant to people. We're thinking about buggies or bikes, things that don't just go by roads, but go through parks, side streets, so we can get a really rich data set. So we were here today this weekend looking at the data visualization. This is a really important aspect because we want people to engage with this data. We want the public to actually be able to look at the data, have an app on their mobile phone, look at a map, understand the data, see, this is where the legal limit is, this is what it means, so they can take preventative action. Our high aspiration is to eventually create a social norm of considering pollution when you're making your travel choices, because if you're doing that to make preventative choices, then you may well end up doing that to prevent yourself from giving out more emissions as well. To this end, we will look at partnering with people like Google Maps and journey planners and City Mapper and people like that to utilize also. We're looking at utilizing existing energy flows. So people who are already moving through the space on bikes or buggies, platforms that are already being used for journey planning. This is our kind of strategy. But yeah, so this is what we have as a kind of output. So we've been looking at different ways of representing it. We're just starting, but that's what we're doing. Yeah, what's the next slide? Oh yeah, so we captured 3 data sets using our prototype this weekend. So we walked around, we went on a bus, and we went by the big sensor at the bottom. And so that's what we've got. After this, we're going to cycle around on the bike. We thought the presentations were a bit later, so we didn't do the bike one yet, but we're going to do that after this. So yeah, if you keep updating on the document, you'll see that we'll have that after this. Yeah. Who's next? Do you want to talk about this?
So we tried to just visualize the data in a very simple way, where we used an open source combination of tools that enable to put dots in different colors. So each dot, it's measurement, and based on and the color reveals the value. But of course we needed to manipulate the data. So that's where Lev comes in.
Yeah, so here you can see that there are many dots in one space, and every dot just shows a measurement. Just means we walked there and we spent 30 seconds and we got a point. After that, we tried to smooth the data a bit so that when I'm standing here, I just look at all the measurements that happened within 5-meter radius from me. And then I can color my dot red or yellow or green. Just a normal data smoothing. Just extra thing we applied to this. Just more about the colors. So we tried to find some intelligent way to color the dots. And the European Union norms for what is the air pollution. There's a yearly norm, which is about 40, I think, for particles. And if it's above yearly norm, we put a yellow dot there. So if I spend a year on that point, if my house is there and my window is always open, it will be above the EU legal norms. And also EU has a hourly norm. For some things it's an hourly, for some things it's an 8-hour, it's more only allowed to breach it 20 times a year. And that's a red one. So if I spend an hour at this red point, then it's already kind of bad for me, and I shouldn't do it too often. So you can see some red points around here, specifically for this stuff. For example, there's a red outside the pub. This is for particle damage, for particles which are about 100 micrometers. Okay, and so we just told us to people smoking outside the pub and spent 5 minutes outside of the sensor, and it showed lots of red. That was kind of interesting. Okay.
So at the bottom of Colston Avenue, by the electricity house, which has just been redeveloped, there is a big green box, which is a Bristol City Council air quality sensor box. And so that's the big station. That recorded 130, and the small sensor, which is the yellow box, which Lev and Hannah brought down, registered 134. So the small sensor is pretty accurate in comparison.
Yeah, so the big station is like the DEFRA Urban Air Quality Network. Yeah. And just to say as well, these are initial visualizations. Obviously, the thing will be to link them to things like, so if you had an app on your phone that was showing this, it can give you a comparison like, that's the equivalent of smoking 20 cigarettes to stand here, or some, we do want to also process it into a way that will make it more directly kind of relatable to people, but we're really just starting with how do we do that? How do we present it? Because it's equally important to present it spatially, so they can make preventative behaviour, and to present it conceptually.
Yeah. Okay. We tried to put it on the bus, and just sitting on the back of the bus for 20 minutes, we could see the spikes. Like this is my bus journey this morning, and just when the bus accelerates or stops, you can see the spike in my particles. I'm inside the bus, the windows are closed, but I'm still very close to the engine in the back seat. So next time I'll probably sit in the front where the driver sits, because I can see the PMs just spiking when it pulls off from the bus stop, when the diesel engine starts and works the heaviest. Okay, so the future plans.
Okay, so one idea for taking this forward was to, I was talking with Lev, and to develop a small version of the monitor. Lev said that he could get one, maybe a sixth of the size of this box, and then talk to Bristol is Open about deploying them on at least some of the lampposts which make up the mesh network around Bristol. This would mean the ability to collect far more data than the DEFRA network current does in Bristol, and then work on the mapping that Evangelos did to produce much higher resolution maps. And then that data could be also added to the Bristol Open Data portal for people to match the data with weather and do predictive analytics.
Yeah, and just last probably want to say that thanks to this event, because we met Evangelos here yesterday, and he made all the visualizations, and we met Nigel here yesterday as well, so it was making visualizations. So it was really nice to spend this weekend improving this. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you want to keep it for the question?
And have you been trying to, or are you working with kind of other people in other cities or other places?
So we are in conversation with several people in London. We've been in conversation some with King's College London about their advising us on what we need to do so that they can take our data seriously, basically, because obviously they are kind of the top level. So
in Bristol you have this free stations which are static. In London we have 200 and 140, and the Bristol and the King's College is running them. So, but they still don't know what happens between them. So they want to take our data, and they are telling us, well, it has to be good enough for us to take it. So we are talking to them in that partnership.
And those three stations you talked about, is one of them the fixed location that you...
So there's one on Rupert Street, there's one in Knoll, there's one on the Wells Road. Those are the three which were working yesterday. There's one on the Northumberland Way and one in Fish Ponds, which were not registering any data yesterday.
Yeah, and the station measures NO2, and we here we measure CO, NO2 and particles. And actually, NO2 was really high in that spot, and PMs were really low. So it's actually very good that it's only measuring it. I think the only problem in that space is nitrogen dioxide. Carbon monoxide and particles are quite low there, so we don't really need anything else.
But yeah, and we're also collaborating with Open Sensors, who are hosting our data, and we're also collaborating with Buggy Air, who are doing a pilot in Bath on buggies with sensors. They lent us this prototype for now, and we're collaborating with Internet of Things Academy and I don't know, like and the climate kick.
Quick question, more questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's just follow on from David. For me, I think what's absolutely critical is that the data that you're getting with your small sensors is comparable to what you're getting from the big station. And clearly you put some data up there, one data point,
Yeah.
and one of
Yeah.
the small sensors of one big station. So are you doing something, and apologies if you have already said this, where you've got a small sensor by a big station for a week or a month or whatever, and then you're able to record and compare it along
So-
over time?
The next version of this, we're going to put it inside the monitoring station that King's College London runs for 2 months, and they allowed us to put it inside it and to calibrate it and stuff. It's unfortunately it's impossible. There's a EU process how to certify it to air quality sensor, so that then EU laws can be employed. But unfortunately there's no law how to certify something that moves around. There's only a legal framework to do it for a static sensor. So we'll never be able to put a U sticker on it, and we'll never be able to enforce the EU laws. Which is unfortunate for us.
Well,
But we
that
can-
depends.
but we-
That depends on future policy decisions, and if we're working with King's College London, which we are, and we're working with the static sensors and putting them inside them, and doing this on a long-term basis, then I don't know. Personally, I think there's a possibility, because everybody knows that we need to do something to improve air quality, and that the modelling is not,
Yeah.
Well, I think mobile sensor seems to be a very good approach to me. If you can move them around, you don't necessarily, I suppose, need to be getting data as a particular point every day or minute or however often it is collected at the moment. It's more flexible, it's potentially more cost effective.
because wherever there's not being data, if there's not data being immediately captured, you need to model. But if you can model and have moving data points moving throughout the model, then you can be checking that model, and
You can use
it can be a lot more
ones
accurate.
to verify the modelling from the static ones.
yeah, they should talk to each other. It's a complementary system.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in the bit about the people receiving this and making some choices and the idea of preventative. Is it kind of part of the plan to make some suggestions for action? So you saying about, I might sit at the top front of the bus, or is it that people will just know what preventative?
So you have to be really careful when you're giving people health advice, because you haven't been able to monitor people's personal exposure. The health effects are not. They are evident, but you can't give people health advice. But for example, taking a different route. If we were to have, as accurate as this, you can see the difference between here and here. The difference between walking down a street and walking, even the difference between walking next to a road and walking next to here, you already reduce your nitrogen exposure by 20%. If you walk on a side street, it's completely different. And if you're managing to monitor in a way that is demonstrating that to people and mapping it effectively so that they can see that, I think, it should be obvious. But obviously, we can, because we're also partnering. These guys are creating an app called Total Exposure, which maps your total exposure of pollution as you move through a space.
And the idea to have
So-
something like Strava,
Yeah.
Strava cyclists
Yeah.
compete by time, how fast is to get from A to B, but you can also compete by least pollution. If you always pull up behind the bus and bright by the exhaust, then you get more pollution. So it's kind of like a game inside the city. Everybody has a sensor and just try to do the same route but with least pollution exposure by cycling considerably.
And just imagine if you were to go onto Google Maps and plan your
Yeah.
route, and it says, this route's 3 minutes faster, this route is less pollution, but it's 2 minutes slower. This route is this much pollution, and it's, this is a kind of high aspiration to.
It's faster, but you lose 2 minutes of your life.
Well, you can't quite say that, but you could say this has this much more exposure or this less exposure. You could get mapping software. There actually exists one mapping platform. There's some people who are doing mobile air quality sensing in Zurich on trams, and they've already built an app which does this, which gives you the least polluted planning route. But ideally it would be better to collaborate with already used mapping software, so you're not trying to introduce a new thing to people. But this is
I can also see some applications of this around when you start including other atmospheric data, weather data, and the impact that has on patterns that you see. And then when you combine all that data, using that to sort of perhaps inform healthcare decisions made by healthcare organisations and that kind of thing. So they know, for example, that we're expecting a hot week, we're expecting this pollen count, and we're expecting this number of respiratory conditions as a result of it, the models that you develop. You can actually have some impact on sort of workforce sort of planning and things like that. So
Do things like
quite further down the line, but
So you could, if from your modelling you see that next week is going to be high pollen count and high levels of pollution, air pollution, then you could, the GPs could send out SMS to their asthma patients, for example, saying take your inhaler with you, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of like policy making, if you're able to make, I mean, I don't know exactly how the policy making works in Bristol, but for example, in London, if you're able to make hyper-local decisions about where you might want to pedestrianise an area or put in some green wall barriers or different things, you'd be able to make those hyper-local decisions on the hotspots, and you would also be able to monitor the effectiveness of those decisions in real time, very quickly. So it could potentially allow some very effective smaller localized interventions, and also being able to get the public behind these interventions, because if they've got an app on their phone that's showing them how much pollution is there and they're not very happy about it. For example, this was trialled by someone already on their buggy, and they discovered that the area around their school was very polluted, and now they're kind of a bit, because they don't know what to do about it, because they have to kind of go that way. So but I think like there's a lot of
Great. So I mean, all of these ideas are well worth more consideration. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.